What's up, guys? This is Chris from DraftDashboard.com. Here are my DFS picks for NBA
Friday, February 24th.
These picks apply for DraftKings and FanDuel. Before I get started, please drop a like on this video and hit that red subscribe button and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our new videos. In this video, I'm going to go over my top picks for today's NBA slate. And if you stick around to the very end of this video, we'll use the Draft Dashboard tools to make a DFS lineup using the picks we just made.
Okay, guys, we have an 8-game slate tonight. So let's take a look at the point guard position. So I normally don't start off with a stud, but this is a stud that I normally wouldn't play for his price tag. But looking into the numbers here, I'm going to suggest this play. I'm going to have him in one of my lineups. I like LaMelo Ball from the Charlotte Hornets playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 10th worst defense overall. They give up the third most fantasy points to opposing point guards. Now, LaMelo Ball has averaged 48.3 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. So I have him projected for this game here at 60 fantasy points, and that's 5.5 times value. He's 11,000 DraftKings salary, 700 less on FanDuel, and Vegas thinks there's going to be 242.5 points scored in this game. So a super high scoring game, a fantastic matchup, and LaMelo Ball has scored 65, 63, and 52 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 38, 41, and 35 minutes. So monster minutes, monster production, and he scored 47, 39, 39, and 46 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Timberwolves. But he's got a heavy role now with the Charlotte Hornets. He's got a usage rate. It was 31% last game, and he's been on fire this season. It's a fantastic matchup. So I like LaMelo Ball here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, let's take a look at the shooting guard position. I like Terry Rozier from the Charlotte Hornets playing the Minnesota Timberwolves, who have the 10th worst defense overall, give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Terry Rozier has averaged 37.5 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 36 minutes per game with a 27% usage rate. So he's projected at 38.9 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.3 times value. And that projection makes sense because he's averaging 37.5 fantasy points per game on the season. It's going to be a super high scoring game, a favorable matchup. Now, he was out last game, but it looks like he's got a hand injury that he's dealing with. But he's going to take the court here tonight. Now, there's a lot of risk in this play. You just got to keep an eye on the injury news to see if he's going to be limited or not. But I have a feeling he's going to take the court and he's going to be just fine. So, I mean, that's kind of the gamble with this play here. But he's 7,400 DraftKings salary, 300 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 242.5 points scored in this game. So Terry Rozier didn't play last game, but he scored 47 and 27 fantasy points in the 2 games before that, playing 33 and 31 minutes. So in his last 4, he scored 47, 27, 40, and 41. So Terry Rozier has clear 40-point upside, which you can almost expect here tonight if he gets the minutes. But he only needs probably 30 minutes or more to get it done. So I think he is worth the risk in this high-scoring game and a good matchup. And he did have that game rest, so we'll see how his hand is holding up. If you get any news on him that he's going to be limited, of course, this play is no good. But outside of that, I like Terry Rozier here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, let's take a look at the small forward position. Now, I apologize, not a ton of value in this video. I'm more kind of picking out the mid-range or expensive players that I think are going to do good on this slate. They just kind of stuck out over all the other guys. Normally I do fill these videos with value plays. I'll try to find a value play for you guys at the end if I don't have one. So let's get into this. At the small forward position, I like Paul George from the LA Clippers playing the Sacramento Kings, who have the 11th worst defense overall, give up the 4th most fantasy points to opposing small forwards. Paul George has averaged 42.4 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 30% usage rate. He's projected at 42 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He is 8,200 DraftKings salary, 400 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 233 points scored in this game, and Paul George has scored 43, 34, and 46 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 36, 31, and 31 minutes. So playing good minutes here. Production has been fantastic. We've been on Paul George while he was in, I think he was in like the high 6K, 7K range. And he was just way underpriced for so long. But this is still a good price tag. Under 8,500 for Paul George is a good price. So he's at 8,200 DraftKings salary. And let's see, how has he done here versus the Kings? Yeah, he's got a good player versus team history. So Paul George has scored 62, 58, 44, and 42 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Sacramento Kings. So I think it puts him in a premier spot here tonight, and he's not overpriced. He could easily go for 50 plus fantasy points and get you way over 5 times value. So I like Paul George here versus the Sacramento Kings.
Before I continue with the picks, I'm excited today because we added a new contest for everyone watching. If you want to enter the drawing for $25 PayPal, all you need to do is like this video, hit that subscribe button, and make a quick comment below to be entered into the drawing. We'll reply to a random comment and let you know that you won. And then we'll send you $25 PayPal. So it's that easy, and we pick a new winner every Saturday and announce them in our video. So get your comment in now so I can add another entry for you.
Okay, let's take a look at the power forward position. So another guy, not a value play here, but he is a lower price tag than the other guys, mid-range play here. So I like Kyle Kuzma from the Washington Wizards playing the New York Knicks, who have a middle-of-the-pack defense overall. They're middle-of-the-pack defending opposing power forwards. Kyle Kuzma also eligible at the small forward position. He's averaging 38.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 35 minutes per game with a 28% usage rate. He's projected at 38.9 fantasy points here tonight, which is his season average, and that's 5 times value. He's 7,800 DraftKings salary, and he's 100 less on FanDuel. So I think he has a fair price on both sites, especially on FanDuel. And Vegas thinks there's going to be 226.5 points scored in this game. Kyle Kuzma has scored 30 and 51 fantasy points in the last 2 games, playing 34 and 35 minutes. So let's see how he's done versus the Knicks here. Pretty good. Very good. Kyle Kuzma has scored 59, 62, 16, and 40 fantasy points in his last 4 games versus the Knicks. So 3 out of those 4 would have been over 5 times value, and that 59 and 62 are like slate breaking numbers there. So I like Kyle Kuzma here versus the New York Knicks. Okay, moving on to the center position. Another solid mid-range play. Really like this play here tonight. Probably my favorite play that I've given you so far. I like Rudy Gobert from the Minnesota Timberwolves. And this is a nice run back if you play Terry Rozier. in your lineup, you could run back Rudy Gobert. So that works out pretty well. I think going with a couple of these mid-range plays from this Minnesota Charlotte Hornets game, this Timberwolves Hornets game I think it's gonna work out pretty well. That's gonna be my strategy for this slate. So Rudy Gobert from the Timberwolves playing the Hornets, who have the second worst defense overall. They give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing centers. So Rudy Gobert has averaged 33.2 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 16% usage rate. He's projected at 36.4 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 7,200 DraftKings salary, 700 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 242.5 points scored in this game. And Rudy Gobert has scored 49, 40, and 27 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 35, 29, and 29 minutes. So he's put up a couple of monster games the past couple of games. He has a fantastic matchup, super high scoring game, and he's got very good track record here versus the Hornets. He scored 48, 39, 56, 38, and 39 fantasy points in his last 5 games versus the Hornets. So I do think he's underpriced a little bit on DraftKings at only 7,200. So I like Rudy Gobert here versus the Charlotte Hornets. So all these guys that I give you in this video today, none of them are on back-to-backs. So like a guy like Evan Mobley, I like this play here at 7,300 DraftKings salary. He could be power forward or center. He's got a fantastic matchup here versus the Atlanta Hawks, who have the 6th worst defense overall, give up the 3rd most fantasy points to opposing centers. Now, Evan Mobley averaging 34.9 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 34 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. But you can see he's been a little more involved the past 3 games, playing 37, 35, 37 minutes, 26% usage rate, 32%, 20%. So above average minutes and usage, and his production has shown as a result. Scored 48, 35, and 35 fantasy points in the last 3 games. He's been pretty consistent producer of this 35 fantasy point mark. And if he scores 36.8 fantasy points, that's 5 times value. Let's just take a look what he does on back-to-backs. If we go to his scoring log here, we can see this back-to-back. He played 5 and 6. Okay, so he played 30 minutes on February 5th. Then on February 6th, played 28 minutes. So it looks like on that back-to-back, they kind of limited his minutes a little bit. But take a look at this one. The 20th played 36 minutes, scored 30 fantasy points. On the 21st, the next night, played 37 minutes, scored 52 fantasy points. So I wouldn't be too scared away from this back-to-back, but it is something to consider. That's kind of why I lean towards a guy like Rudy Gobert. He's got a better matchup, no back-to-back. But Evan Mobley is much less expensive on FanDuel, only 100 more, whereas Rudy Gobert 700 more. So could go Evan Mobley on FanDuel, Rudy Gobert on DraftKings. But I did say I wanted to hunt for a value play for you. Now I found another like mid-range play here. A guy that I don't normally play, but I think I'm gonna have to look his way now. He's just been proving himself, and I think he's just worked into the offense of this team. With minutes and production in a way that it benefits him on the fantasy, in fantasy and as a player in his fantasy point production. So PJ Washington from the Charlotte Hornets playing the Minnesota Timberwolves. So if you want to go with this Charlotte Hornets stack, I've given you 3 Charlotte Hornets players so far. The first one is the ultimate stud, LaMelo Ball, from the Charlotte Hornets at 11,000 DraftKings salary. The second one was he was a shooting guard. It was not Anthony Edwards. It was Terry Rozier from the Charlotte Hornets, and he's 7,400 DraftKings salary.
Real quick guys, I got great news. For a limited time, we're offering a full 30-day trial to Draft Dashboard. You can try all of our DFS tools for all sports. You can try the Position Optimizer, where you can see the top players ranked for each position. And we added a new Player Trends tool, where you can see the top salary differences between FanDuel and DraftKings. It's a really good tool to help you pick out value for the site that you're playing on. Oh, and if you're tired of doing research every day, we just added a cheat sheet that shows hand-picked plays for the slate. No confusing stat lines, no headaches, just a simple cheat sheet that shows the absolute best players for your lineups.
And now I have a third pick from the Charlotte Hornets, PJ Washington. And so we know the Minnesota Timberwolves 10th worst defense overall, give up the second most fantasy points defending opposing centers. So PJ Washington has averaged 29.1 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 33 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He's projected at 33.3 fantasy points here tonight. That's 5.1 times value. He's 6,600 DraftKings salary, 500 more on FanDuel. We know Vegas thinks there's going to be 242.5 points scored in this game, and that's why we want to target this game and stack this game. So PJ Washington has scored 47, 39, and 33 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 32, 35, and 33 minutes. So not a lot to complain about. I know his price is a little bit high, but still 6,600. That is some savings if you want to come down to PJ Washington at the power forward or the center position. So I like PJ Washington here versus the Minnesota Timberwolves. Okay, so let's take a look for a value play. This video was uncharacteristic in the sense I usually have these videos filled with value plays, but I gave you some studs, some mid-range plays. But let's take a look at a value play here. So let's find a value play that has a good matchup. This is sorted by Dash Rank, which just gives you a quick glance look at their combination of things, their matchup, how they've been playing recently, all that. By no means is it a crystal ball. You gotta just look at all the numbers, do your own research, use your gut, use your intuition. You know how it goes. So let's see here. We're looking at 3,500, 3,600. So we got a back-to-back player here, Ty Jerome, and he scored 29, 17, and 22 fantasy points in the last 3 games, played 29, 16, and 18 minutes. So he could be a candidate. We'd have to take a look to see why he played 29 minutes last game and if that opportunity is going to be available again tonight. So that one requires we'll have to look into do a little more research on Ty Jerome. But let's take a look at a guy who most likely will get minutes here tonight. Now, he is on a back-to-back, but his price tag is really low, and I do like this play. So he doesn't have a good matchup here. Actually found 2. Okay, they are both on back-to-backs, but their price tags are both low, and their upside is pretty high. So take a look at Karis LeVert from the Cleveland Cavaliers playing the Atlanta Hawks, who have the 6th worst defense overall, give up the absolute most fantasy points to opposing shooting guards. Karis LeVert has averaged 25 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He's projected at 21.2 fantasy points here tonight, but I think he can score 25 fantasy points or more here tonight and get you over 5 times value. He's 4,500 DraftKings salary, 800 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 225.5 points scored in this game. Karis LeVert has scored 26, 21, and 14 fantasy points in his last 3 games, playing 31, 28, and 20 minutes. So I like that his minutes and his production have been trending up. So that's why I think he's an interesting play in a good matchup here tonight. I think a little underpriced because I think he could get to 25 fantasy points, and that would be, it would be well over 5 times value. So the other value play that I like, also on a back-to-back, but I think his minutes should be fine, is Luguentz Dort from the Oklahoma City Thunder playing the Phoenix Suns, who have a good defense overall. They've been good versus opposing small forwards, but Luguentz Dort has averaged 25.6 fantasy points per game on the season, playing an average of 30 minutes per game with a 20% usage rate. He's projected at 25.6 fantasy points here tonight, and that's 5.7 times value. And I like this play because that's his season average. He's only 4,500 DraftKings salary, 900 more on FanDuel. Vegas thinks there's going to be 231.5 points scored in this game, and Luguentz Dort has scored 36, 26, and 13 fantasy points in the last 3 games, playing 36, 24, and 24 minutes. So he scored 25, 18, and 17 fantasy points in his last 3 games versus the Suns. So Luguentz Dort, 4 out of his last 5 games, he scored 26 fantasy points or more. So if he gets 25 or 26 fantasy points here tonight at 4,500 DraftKings salary, getting you 5.7 times value, and then if he goes off and gets 30 plus fantasy points, that's a nice value play. And you think he'll play probably right around 30 minutes, 25 to 35 minutes, so it's a pretty big range, but he should be out there long enough to get it done. So I like Luguentz Dort here versus the Phoenix Suns.
If you want to try all these daily fantasy tools for yourself, click the link in the description below this video or just go to draftdashboard.com. You can use our DFS lineup optimizer to build quality lineups using our picks and your own custom player pool. Click the link in the description below this video and try all these daily fantasy tools right now. Thanks so much for watching. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe to this channel and hit that bell icon so you can get instant updates whenever we post a new video. Thank you so much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please smiggity smash that like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Oh, and please comment below with your favorite player for this NBA slate. I love to hear what you guys have to think. Thanks again, and good luck.